big story of the day on Talk Radio. Be well informed with the Times and the Sunday Times.
We've been hearing this story, goodness knows, for an awfully long time, ever since the mass expansion of universities. But a new report suggests that 1 in 4 university students are on courses which, frankly, are not financially worthwhile. Probably not for them, but definitely not for the taxpayer. Official government data shows that 25% of youngsters are studying for degrees which will produce a negative return for the public purse. And in addition, another 18% of students are seeing a negative return on their personal investment. And frankly, they'd be better off had they not attended university at all. Now, those findings come in a report by the conservative-leaning think tank Onward, which today is urging government ministers to curb what they call degree mis-selling by greedy universities. And despite claims that the graduates of certain courses go on to successful careers, in reality, a substantial minority will never get jobs which pay well, and certainly not in their chosen field. And it also means they'll never earn enough to repay much of their student loans. And after 30 years, the debt is wiped. The taxpayer, of course, has to pick up the bill. Well, let's talk about this with Gillian, who's the Conservative MP for Chichester and co-author of that report. Good morning to you, Gillian.
Good morning, Julia.
Now, I mean, this is something a lot of people like me have been saying for many years. This was a mass expansion of university under Tony Blair, wanted 50% of young people to go to university. I understand the urge and the desire. I think university is life-changing for so many people, opens so many doors. But the reality is, with 50% of youngsters who can't even get 5 decent grade up to grade C GCSEs, unlikely they can manage a university course. But also now it appears that university courses aren't worth them doing in the first place. Why do you come to that conclusion?
Well, I think we have some more data now. I mean, I completely agree with you. I mean, it's clear that when you have a new system in place and you set a target, you quite often get some adverse effects of setting a target. And what we now have is a lot of data about what's happened to people who've gone to university since that target was set. And, what it shows is there is a clear need to review the system, both for the students and for the universities, for employers, but also, as you say, for the taxpayer. And it's a big investment decision, and people need to make sure that they make a good investment decision. It's a £40,000 to £50,000 investment decision that people are making, and whether they're actually paying it themselves or the taxpayer eventually end up paying it, it's still a cost. And we need to get it right, and they need to get it right. If you're going to spend 3 years studying,
yeah.
You need to make sure that you can earn more than you would have done if you'd have just gone into work in the first place.
And indeed, that those 3 years you're not earning full-time, if you're working through the holidays like most students do, that you're missing out on those earnings as well. And there have been lots of reports over the years. I mean, wasn't it something like, the average graduate, you can earn an extra 250 grand a year more over their lifetime because of the going to university. But that was actually only the case when very few people, under 20%, went to university, and where a degree did mean that you did a graduate level job and those paid more and you were able to move your way up the income scale. Now, basically to be a temp secretary you need a degree. To do virtually any job people are expected to have a degree, and an awful lot of people with degrees are working in jobs where there's no reason for them to be a graduate at all. So they're simply not seeing that income bonus which they would have otherwise expected.
No, that's true. You're right. When I did a degree apprenticeship, but when I left school and started work and then did a degree eventually, it was a differentiator. Whereas now, as you say, it's almost it's almost required for most jobs, and people are now going on to masters and actually indeed sometimes spending 4 years studying to try and get a differentiator. But the most important thing is, getting a degree in an education is a wonderful thing, but it has to be something that it can make a difference to your life further on. And if it's something that you've studied that actually there's nobody in the workplace really values, or it's something that is not going to get you a premium, then we really do have to question whether that's the right thing for you to do. And most people who are making that choice don't really understand that. This data is quite new, and I think it's important for people to make a decision. I'm not saying that we're not saying that everybody has to make a fortune as a result of doing a degree. Not at all.
No, and also
know what they're doing.
There are an awful lot of jobs which people need a degree to, a qualification to, which aren't going to be well paid, and they may not financially make the money, but they're doing worthwhile, interesting work. They're either doing scientific research, or they're being a teacher, or plenty of other jobs which will not lead them to be earning high salaries, but are absolutely worthwhile for both them and for society that they do. But as you say, it needs to be a more honest debate, doesn't it? And I do worry that in particular when you've got, say, when I advise my daughter about what she does after A-levels, I can give you advice. I'm having gone through, my parents were first generation university, from working class homes, grammar schools, and then university, changed their lives. And I'm going to be able to use, their advice and my experience at university to give good advice about the sort of courses to do, which universities to apply to. Whereas an awful lot of youngsters are basically being told, any course at any university is worth having a degree from. And you and I both know that in the real employment world, that's simply not true. And it's actually the working class kids from homes where they haven't got university educated parents who are the ones who will most benefit from getting a good degree from a good university in terms of their lifetime earning and their career opportunities. But they simply won't be given the information in the same way that the middle class kids will always get that information from their parents.
Well, that is possibly true. I mean, there's some really good things that have happened as a result of this policy. And one of them is working class kids. More working class kids than ever are going to university. And when I left school, I grew up in Knowsley in Merseyside. At 16, nobody went to university. Now a lot of kids do go to university. But it is important to make sure, as you say, that they're steered into something that at least they know what it's likely to lead to, and they don't have sort of false expectations that if they do a degree in some of the creative arts courses that we've talked about, not all of them, but some of them, then actually it doesn't have very much value in the workplace. And that's why one of the other things we've said is we're not saying people shouldn't have access to university, not at all, but perhaps a good way to approach further education is degree apprenticeship for some more students perhaps than are going today, because then an employer kind of steers you in the right direction and makes sure that you do study something that's worthwhile, and that's certainly my own experience.
Again, I do think also we've got to tackle careers advice in schools. It was certainly dire at my school. It was dire at every school, virtually everyone I've ever spoken to, in terms of just knowing the outcomes. And I'm amazed at the number of young people I speak to. I say, what do you want to do? What are you going to study at university, and what's your career plan? And the number of them who have no idea, they say, I want to do X job. They have no idea what that job involves, and no idea of, so what is the qualification most people doing that job have actually got themselves? And have you gone down that route? Given that in my day, you had to go to a library to look at a booklet to find information out, but now you can Google it. It's extraordinary how little knowledge there is about what university degrees can lead to and what they can't lead to.
Well, that's another thing. I mean, I agree with you. And many careers advisors are basically advising from the situation that they went through themselves. Their knowledge is 20 years out of date in many cases. Yeah. There are literally thousands, hundreds of thousands of careers, and how do you get that across to people? It is incredibly difficult. Obviously, we could do a much better job with platforms, and the government has recognised this and said that they want to review it and put something better in place. But still, whatever you put in place will be out of date, which is why in some cases it's much better to try and get a bit of work experience, understand what these jobs are, understand what you need to study to be proficient in them and to get to the top of them, these careers, and perhaps have some more practical experience at the same time as you're making your investment decision in your education, your further education, your higher education, and trying to bring those two together, I think is something that we would like to see happen in a lot more cases.
Absolutely. And just finally, may I ask you regarding these protests we've seen outside Parliament? We saw Anna Soubry, one of your Conservative colleagues, being harangued and harassed in a really intimidatory fashion outside Westminster, almost preventing from entering the Palace of Westminster yesterday after appearing on television. Some 50 plus MPs have now signed a letter to the Metropolitan Police Chief, Cressida Dick, saying they want more action taken by the police. Do you think we're going to have some sort of limitation on protests outside Parliament? Have you experienced any of this yourself?
I personally haven't, but there are protesters outside Parliament. Actually, in most cases, there's not very many of them, and they're quite benign. They're with flags and they're sort of putting their point across. But these particular individuals, as we all saw on the television, are intimidating. They're quite nasty. They've got a very specific viewpoint, and Brexit has brought out at the extremes a lot of really quite nasty debate. And I notice even myself, and I'm a new MP who is not in the front line like Anna, but I notice myself, you put something on Twitter and these people with hashtags from a campaign group or another are immediately on there with kind of really quite intimidating language, and Brexit has in itself brought a little bit of that out, and that's one of the reasons why